The neon lights of Nexus Station's outer rim cast eerie shadows across the cantina's smoke-filled interior. The air was thick with alien cigarette smoke and the bitter smell of spilled drinks. In the corner booth, away from the main crowd, sat two unlikely companions sharing a table that had seen better days. Crystal hunched over his drink, his massive frame barely fitting in the cramped booth. Once, he had been a proud warrior of the hegemony, standing 8 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and armor-plated carapace that could deflect plasma bolts. Now, half his body was a patchwork of crude cybernetics and makeshift repairs. His left arm had been replaced with a mechanical substitute that sparked occasionally, and his right eye was nothing but an empty socket surrounded by scar tissue. Across from him sat Yuki Tanaka, a small human woman with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. Her recording device blinked steadily in the dim light, capturing every word of what would become the most important interview of her career. She had traveled halfway across the galaxy to find this broken alien veteran, following rumors and whispered stories in spaceport bars. "You want to know about the war?" Crystal's voice crackled through his damaged vocal cords, the sound like grinding metal about what your species did to mine. The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Yuki nodded slowly, her hand unconsciously moving to check her recorder. She had heard fragments of the story before, but never from someone who had actually been there. The official records were classified, buried in military archives that no civilian would ever see. Crystal's remaining organic eye fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. It was a look she had seen before in war veterans, that 1,000-yard stare that spoke of horrors beyond imagination. But there was something else there too, something that surprised her. Respect, maybe even admiration. "Look at me," he said, gesturing to his broken body with his good hand. "Really look. This is what remains of the hegemony's finest warrior. I commanded 3 battle fleets. I conquered worlds. I made entire species kneel before our might." Paused to take another drink, his mechanical hand trembling slightly as he lifted the glass. The liquid inside was a violent purple color that seemed to glow in the dim light. Yuki had heard it was the strongest alcohol in the known galaxy, something that could kill most species with a single sip. "We ruled 17 star systems," Crystal continued, his voice growing stronger with the alcohol. "The hegemony had never faced defeat. Never. For 300 years, we expanded across the galaxy like a plague. We crushed the Zentari in 3 months. Those insect warriors thought their hive mind would save them. It didn't." His mandibles clicked nervously as he remembered those easier times. The Malthic Confederation lasted barely a year. They had ships the size of small moons, weapons that could crack planets. We still destroyed them. Yuki leaned forward, fascinated despite herself. She had studied galactic history, knew about the great wars that had shaped the current political landscape. But hearing it from someone who had actually been there was different. It was real in a way that textbooks could never capture. "So what changed?" she asked quietly. Crystal's laugh was bitter and hollow, like the sound of breaking glass. "Then we found Earth, a small blue world with a single moon orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Our scouts reported primitive chemical rockets and crude nuclear weapons. The inhabitants hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel." He shook his head, the motion causing his cybernetic eye to spark. "We expected another easy conquest, another species to add to our empire. The High Command didn't even send a full invasion fleet. They thought a single battle group would be enough to subdue your entire planet." The alien veteran stared into his drink, seeing reflections of memories that still haunted his dreams. "We had a saying in the hegemony military. Victory is certain, defeat is impossible. We had conquered races with technology superior to yours. We had crushed civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. How could a single primitive world pose any threat?" Yuki felt a chill run down her spine. She knew how the story ended, but hearing it from this broken alien warrior made it real in a way she had never experienced before. "Your Admiral Kim Dae-ho changed everything," Crystal said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That name still haunts our military academies, the ones that still exist anyway." The cantina around them seemed to grow quieter, as if the universe itself was listening to this confession. In the background, alien music played softly, but Yuki barely heard it. She was completely focused on the broken warrior sitting across from her, waiting for him to continue the story that would change everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The first battle was at your mining colony. On Kepler 442b, Crixtal I grew distant with memory, staring into the smoky air as if he could still see the battle playing out before him. 300 of our ships against what we thought was a defenseless outpost. His mechanical claws scraped against the metal table, leaving deep scratches in the surface. The sound made Yuki wince, but she didn't dare interrupt. The alien warrior was lost in his memories, reliving a nightmare that had clearly changed him forever. The intelligence reports were laughable, Crixtal continued, his voice taking on a bitter edge. Small mining operation with maybe 2,000 colonists. No military installations, no defense platforms. Just humans digging rocks out of asteroids around a dead moon. He took another drink, the purple liquid seeming to burn as it went down. Fleet Commander Vexkari was so confident he brought his personal battlecruiser to watch the conquest. He wanted to see humans surrender with his own eyes, wanted to add another easy victory to his collection. Yuki could picture it in her mind, a massive alien fleet dropping out of hyperspace, expecting to find terrified miners begging for mercy. Instead, they found something the hegemony had never encountered before. "We expected miners, Crixtal," said his voice dropping to a growl. "Instead, we found demons." The alien veteran's remaining eye focused on Yuki with an intensity that made her feel like prey being studied by a predator. "Your people don't fight like other species." When the Zentari faced defeat, they retreated to regroup. When the Molthic were cornered, they negotiated, but humans do something that defies all military logic. He paused, seeming to struggle with the memory. Park Jin-woo was the mining foreman, a simple civilian who should have been loading our containers and checking safety protocols. Instead, he became something else entirely the moment our ships appeared. Crixtal described how the human colonists had transformed their peaceful mining operation into a fortress of death in less than 6 hours. Asteroid mining lasers, designed to cut through solid rock, were repositioned and turned into ship-killing weapons that could slice through hegemony armor like paper. Industrial gravity manipulators, normally used to move massive chunks of ore, became tactical weapons that could crush smaller ships or fling them into each other like toys. The first wave of our fighters expected to strafe some mining platforms and watch humans run in terror, Crixtal said, his mechanical hand clenching into a fist. But instead, they flew into a wall of laser fire that turned 20 of our best pilots into vapor in seconds. But what happened next was what truly shook the hegemony forces. Park Jin-woo, this simple mining foreman, opened a communication channel to the entire alien fleet. His voice came through clear and calm, without a trace of fear or hesitation. Park Jin-woo broadcast a message to our fleet. Crixtal shuddered. At the memory, he didn't plead for mercy. He didn't try to negotiate. He looked directly into our cameras and said, "Welcome to hell." The alien warrior's voice grew quiet, almost reverent. Then he detonated the entire moon they were mining. Yuki felt her breath catch in her throat. She'd heard rumors about the Kepler incident, but the official reports had been classified. No one knew exactly what had happened during those first few hours of contact between humans and the hegemony. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, Crixtal continued. Park Jin-woo had spent 6 hours placing mining charges throughout the moon's core. When he triggered them, the blast crippled half our fleet in an instant. Ships that had survived battles with advanced civilizations were torn apart by flying chunks of rock moving at incredible speed. The alien's cybernetic eye flickered as he accessed his memory files. 147 ships destroyed. In the first minute, another 38 damaged so badly, they had to retreat. All because a mining foreman decided to turn his workplace into the galaxy's largest improvised explosive device. But what terrified Crixtal most was what came next. Any other species would have considered the destruction of their home a final, desperate act before surrender. The human survivors should have been broken, demoralized, ready to give up after sacrificing so much. Instead, they became even more dangerous. The humans didn't surrender, Crystal said, his voice filled with something that might have been admiration if it weren't mixed with so much fear. They didn't flee. They climbed into those tiny mining pods and continued the fight. These weren't military vehicles. They were simple one-person craft designed for moving between asteroids, equipped with basic life support and minimal shielding. Against a hegemony battle fleet, they should have been nothing more than floating coffins. They came at us like missiles, Crystal remembered. No formation, no tactics, just pure suicidal determination. They rammed our ships, they overloaded their equipment to create improvised bombs. They turned their mining tools into weapons we had never seen before. One image was burned into his memory forever. Engineer Han So-young, a young woman who looked barely old enough to be working in space, had jury-rigged her plasma cutter to overload. The device was never meant to be used as a weapon, but she had somehow turned it into a bomb powerful enough to cripple a warship. She flew her pod straight into our flagship's engine core. Crystal S's voice dropped to a whisper. I was monitoring the scanner feeds, watching for threats. I saw her coming, saw her plasma cutter glowing white-hot as it prepared to explode. He paused, his mechanical hand trembling slightly. But what I'll never forget is her face, through the scanner feed. I saw her expression in those final seconds. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming in terror or rage. Crystal looked directly at Yuki, his organic eye wide with remembered shock. She was smiling when she died, like she had just accomplished something wonderful. The siege lasted 8 months, Crystal continued, his cybernetic parts worry. Loudly, a stress overtook his damaged systems. Sound was like grinding gears, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for underestimating humanity. Kepler Station was supposed to be easy, a civilian habitat. 50,000 humans trapped inside with nowhere to run. He paused, staring at his mechanical hand as it twitched involuntarily. The memories were clearly painful, but he seemed driven to tell the story, as if confession might somehow ease the burden he carried. The station was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, Crystal explained, his voice taking on the tone of someone reciting facts to avoid thinking about their meaning. Families lived there. Children went to school. People worked normal jobs in the hydroponics bays and manufacturing centers. It was peaceful, boring even. Yuki could picture it, a small human community carved out of rock and metal floating. In the darkness between stars, ordinary people living ordinary lives, completely unprepared for war. It should have been a simple occupation. We surrounded the station with 40 ships, Crystal continued. Cut their supply lines. No food shipments, no ammunition deliveries, no reinforcements. We jammed their communications so they couldn't call for help. Any other species would have surrendered within weeks. The alien veteran's mandibles clicked rapidly as he remembered the assault. A nervous habit that had developed during the long months of fighting. Fleet Admiral Grixmore was confident. He had sieged dozens of worlds. Before he knew how these things worked, cut off supplies, wait for hunger and desperation to do the work, then accept surrender when the defenders got tired of watching their children starve. But the humans of Kepler Station had different ideas. Instead of surrendering, they transformed their home into a fortress, Crystal said, his voice filled with grudging respect. Commander Lee Min-ho should have been managing cargo schedules and maintenance reports. Instead, he became a general. Within days, he had organized every single person on that station into a military unit. The transformation was unlike anything the hegemony had seen before. Civilian engineers became weapons designers. Cooks became ammunition manufacturers. Even the elderly and disabled found ways to contribute to the defense. Dr. Choi Yoonji was running the medical bay, Crystal remembered. She should have been treating sick children and fixing broken bones. Instead, she started converting medical supplies into explosives. Disinfectant became corrosive acid. Surgical tools became weapons. She turned her hospital into a bomb factory. Alien Warrior's organic eye grew distant as he recalled the ingenuity of the human defenders. They had taken everything in their civilian habitat and turned it into instruments of war. Maintenance robots were reprogrammed to carry bombs. Food processors were modified to manufacture ammunition. Even the children's toys were converted into surveillance devices and communication equipment. Even the children helped, Crystal said quietly. They carried ammunition to the fighters. They tended wounded soldiers. They operated communications. Equipment. We had never seen anything like it. Yuki felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to imagine children, some probably her own age during the war, living in a besieged station where every day brought the possibility of death. Most species would have evacuated their young or kept them safely hidden. But humans had made them part of the fight. I led the first boarding party. Crystal's voice cracked with emotion. Sector 7. We expected to find frightened civilians hiding in storage closets. Instead, we found a school that had been converted into a military bunker. The alien shuddered as he recalled breaching the station's outer hall. His squad had cut through the metal walls, expecting to face desperate defenders with improvised weapons. What they found instead was a coordinated defense that had been planned and prepared for months. The hallways were filled with traps, he remembered. Pressure plates that triggered explosive charges. Walls that opened to reveal firing positions. Every door was booby-trapped. Every room was a potential kill zone. But what haunted Crystal most was the encounter that had cost him his organic eye and left him with scars that would never fully heal. A young girl named Kim Yujin was maybe 10 years old, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She came around a corner carrying what looked like a school backpack. My soldiers thought she was just a scared child trying to find her parents. The alien veteran's mechanical hand clenched into a fist. She had jury-rigged a plasma grenade using parts from the school's science lab. When she got close enough to my squad, she smiled and said something in your language. Then she triggered the device. The explosion had been devastating. 3 hegemony soldiers, elite warriors who had survived battles across the galaxy, were killed instantly. Crystal himself had been thrown against a wall with such force that his natural armor cracked, and his eye was destroyed by flying shrapnel. But she wasn't the worst of it, Crystal continued, his voice growing stronger as he pushed through the painful memory. Your teacher, Yoon Jae-soon, had converted the chemistry lab into a weapons factory, used school equipment to create acid. Weapons that could dissolve through our battle armor like it was made of paper. The alien warrior described how the teacher had become a master of chemical warfare. Using his knowledge of science to create weapons the hegemony had never encountered. Cleaning supplies became poison gas. Laboratory acids became armor-piercing. Weapons. Even the school's 3D printers were modified to manufacture explosive devices. He set traps everywhere, Crystal remembered. Doorknobs that released contact poison. Floor tiles that would give way to reveal acid pits. Ventilation systems that could be flooded with toxic gas at a moment's notice. The siege had become a nightmare of urban warfare unlike anything in hegemony military history. Every corridor was a battlefield. Every room was a potential trap. The humans fought with a creativity and determination that seemed to defy military logic. For every sector we captured, the humans extracted a horrific price, Crystal said, his cybernetic parts sparking with the intensity of his emotions. We lost more soldiers taking that one station than we had in the conquest of entire worlds, but they never stopped fighting. Even when they were wounded, even when they were outnumbered, even when they were dying, they kept finding ways to hurt us. The alien veteran looked directly at Yuki, his organic eye reflecting the pain of those 8 months of hell. We won. Eventually, but victory felt like defeat. Half my soldiers were dead or wounded, the other half were broken mentally. And we all knew the same terrible truth. This was just one station. There were millions more humans out there, and now they knew we were coming. The real nightmare began when we captured one of your soldiers. Crystal's organic eye glazed over with remembered terror. His cybernetic parts began to spark more frequently, as if the memory was overloading his damaged systems. We had finally caught a break. A living human to interrogate, to study, to break. He reached for his drink with trembling claws, the purple liquid sloshing as his mechanical hand shook. Sergeant Kong Tae-hyun had been taken during a raid on Supply Depot Alpha. He was wounded. unconscious, and separated from his unit. Perfect conditions for capture. Yuki leaned forward, sensing this was the heart of the story. She had heard whispers about a human prisoner who had somehow turned the tables on his captors. But the details had always been classified or dismissed as propaganda. The hegemony had perfected interrogation over centuries of conquest, Crystal continued. We had techniques that could break any species within days. The Zentari would reveal their hive secrets after 12 hours of neuromanipulation. Molthik would give up their military codes after a single session of psychological pressure. His mandibles clicked nervously as he remembered their confidence. Intelligence Commander Zekfar was excited. He had never interrogated a human before. He wanted to understand what made your species so difficult to defeat. Thought a few days in the interrogation chamber would give us the keys to conquering Earth. The alien veteran paused, staring into his glass as if it contained the answers to questions he didn't want to ask. We kept Sergeant Kang in the most secure detention facility on our flagship. Quantum-locked cells, neural dampening fields, armed guards every 6 feet. Nothing could escape from there. Nothing had ever even tried. But humans, as the hegemony was learning, didn't follow the rules that governed other species. The first interrogation session lasted 18 hours, Crystal remembered. Commander Zekfar used every technique in our arsenal. Pain induction, memory extraction, psychological manipulation, chemical persuasion. Kang should have been broken. Within the first hour, instead, something completely unexpected happened. The human soldier not only resisted the interrogation, but seemed to be studying his captors while they worked on him. Every question they asked revealed information about hegemony tactics. Every torture device they used taught him about their technology. Every guard rotation showed him their security procedures. He was learning our language, Crystal said, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. Not just the words, but the cultural meaning behind them. He figured out how our military hierarchy worked, how our social systems functioned, what our psychological weak points were. The alien warrior's cybernetic eye flickered as he accessed his memory files. By the 3rd day, Kong was speaking fluent hegemony. By the 5th day, he was making jokes that only someone with deep cultural understanding could appreciate. By the end of the 1st week, he was psychoanalyzing his interrogators. What happened next defied everything the hegemony thought they knew about prisoner psychology. Instead of becoming more broken with each session, Sergeant Kong became more dangerous. He began turning the interrogations into opportunities to gather intelligence and manipulate his captors. He convinced Guard Captain Vlexmore that I was planning a coup. Crystal laughed bitterly, the sound like grinding metal. Think about that. A human prisoner, chained to a torture rack, convinced one of our most decorated officers that his own commanding officer was a traitor. The manipulation was masterful in its subtlety. Kang had studied the guard captain during their brief interactions. Noting his insecurities about promotion and his fears about being passed over for advancement, during interrogation sessions, the human would drop casual comments about overheard conversations, suggest that certain officers were plotting against others, and gradually plant seeds of paranoia and mistrust. Your sergeant started a civil war. Within our own ranks, while chained to a torture rack, Crystal continued, his voice filled with grudging respect. Guards began watching each other instead of watching him. Officers started investigating their own subordinates. The entire command structure began to fracture. The chaos provided exactly the distraction Kong needed for his escape plan. He had been studying the ship's layout through conversations with guards, mapping security rotations through careful observation, and gathering information about the vessel's critical systems during his trips to and from the interrogation chamber. His escape was masterfully planned, Crystal admitted. He had spent weeks preparing, using information gathered during his captivity to identify weaknesses in our security. When he finally made his move, it was like watching a precision military operation conducted by a single man. The human soldier had somehow picked the quantum locks on his restraints using improvised tools made from medical waste and torture implements. He neutralized the guards silently, then made his way through the ship's ventilation system like a ghost. But his real target wasn't escape, it was sabotage. He reached the flagship's quantum navigation core, Crixtal said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. That section of the ship was supposed to be impossible to access without proper authorization codes. Kong broke in using techniques we still don't understand. Human Sergeant had done far more than just sabotage the navigation system. He had uploaded a virus into the ship's computer network, downloaded complete tactical information about hegemony fleet positions and battle plans, and transmitted everything to human forces before beginning his escape. He killed 17 of my soldiers with improvised weapons made from torture implements and medical waste. Crixtal's voice was barely audible now. A sharpened interrogation probe became a deadly spear. Cleaning chemicals became poison gas. Even the restraints from his cell were turned into garrotes. Alien veteran's mechanical hand clenched into a fist as he remembered the carnage. These weren't lucky shots or desperate struggles. Every kill was precise, calculated, efficient. He moved through our ship like death itself, and we couldn't stop him. But Sergeant Kang wasn't finished. His final act of defiance was to steal a hegemony fighter from the ship's hangar bay and use it to destroy 3 more vessels during his escape. The fighter's weapons weren't designed for ship-to-ship combat at close range, but the human pilot had somehow modified them during his brief time in the hangar. He overloaded the fighter's power core and used it as a guided missile against our escort frigates, Crixtal remembered. Then he ejected at the last second and was picked up by a human rescue ship that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The intelligence Sergeant Kang had provided during his escape proved devastating to hegemony forces. The tactical information he had stolen led directly to the human victory at the Battle of Proxima Nebula, where Admiral Song Haidzen's fleet used detailed knowledge of hegemony battle formations to annihilate an entire battle group. 47 ships destroyed in 6 hours, Crixtal said. His cybernetic parts worried with the intensity of his emotions. An entire battle group that had conquered 12 star systems was wiped out because one human soldier refused to be broken. The alien veteran looked directly at Yuki, his organic eye reflecting the terrible knowledge he had gained. That's when we realized the truth. We weren't fighting soldiers. We weren't fighting warriors. We were fighting something far more dangerous. We were fighting humans who refused to accept that they could lose. The end came not through battle, but through your species' impossible persistence. Crixtal finished his drink with a trembling claw, the empty glass hitting the table with a hollow sound that seemed to echo in the smoky cantina. The alien veteran's cybernetic parts whirred loudly as he struggled to process memories that still seemed impossible, even after all these years. His organic eye stared into the distance, seeing ghosts of a war that had redefined what it meant to fight for survival. After Sergeant Kong's escape, everything changed. Crixtal began, his voice taking on the tone of someone recounting a natural disaster. The Hegemony High Command realized we weren't fighting a military. We were fighting an entire species that had decided to survive at any cost. He paused, his mechanical hand tapping against the table in an irregular rhythm that matched his damaged thought patterns. What your people did next was something we had never seen in 300 years of conquest. You transformed your entire civilization into a war machine within 18 months. Yuki could barely comprehend the scale of what he was describing, an entire species mobilizing for total war. Every person becoming part of a vast military machine focused on a single goal: survival. Factory worker Nam Gaisu was building civilian vehicles on Earth, Crixtal continued. Assembly line worker. Probably never thought about military production in his life. Within 6 months, he had designed mass production facilities that could build warships faster than we could destroy them. The alien veteran's mandibles clicked as he remembered the intelligence reports that had flooded the Gemini command centers. Human industrial capacity was expanding at an impossible rate. Factories that had been making consumer goods were retooled to produce weapons. Civilian infrastructure was converted to military use. Even schools and hospitals became part of the war effort. Our analysts couldn't believe the numbers, Crixtal said, his cybernetic eye flickering with accessed data. You were launching 3 new warships every day. 3, every single day. Ships that weren't just copies of existing designs, but improved versions incorporating lessons learned from every battle. But the ships were just the beginning. Human creativity in warfare seemed to know no limits. Scientists who had been working on peaceful research projects suddenly found themselves developing weapons that defied every convention of civilized conflict. Scientist Dr. Jung Manesio had been studying renewable energy, Crystal remembered. Fusion power, clean technology, ways to help her planet. Then the war started, and she developed weapons that violated every convention of civilized warfare. The alien shuddered as he recalled the reports of human weapons that seemed to come from nightmares rather than research laboratories. Fusion bombs that could crack moons, plasma weapons that could melt through any armor. Most terrifying of all, biological weapons specifically designed to target hegemony physiology. She created a virus that only affected our species, Crystal said quietly. Something that could spread through our air recycling systems and kill entire ship crews without touching any other life form. It was brilliant and absolutely terrifying. But what truly broke the hegemony's will to fight wasn't the weapons or the ships. It was the realization that they were facing an enemy that would never give up, never negotiate, never accept anything less than total victory, your president. Lee Soo-jin made a broadcast to our high command. Crystal's voice carried a tone of grudging respect mixed with lingering terror. She appeared on every communication channel we had, somehow breaking through our most secure networks like they were children's toys. The alien veteran's organic eye focused on Yuki, with an intensity that made her feel like she was looking into the face of someone who had seen the end of the world. She looked directly into our cameras and said humanity would fight until the last human died or the last hegemony ship burned. She meant it. The message had been accompanied by footage from across human space. Children learning to build weapons in school, elderly people working in ammunition factories, disabled humans finding ways to contribute to the war effort. An entire species united in purpose, with a determination that seemed to defy nature itself. We tried to negotiate, Crystal admitted. The High Command sent peace envoys, offered to withdraw from human space, even suggested tribute payments. Your president's response was to broadcast the execution of our ambassadors, then launch the largest military offensive in galactic history. The final battle at Sol System had been less a military engagement than a demonstration of what happened when an unstoppable force met an enemy that refused to yield. Human Admiral Park Min-jin commanded a fleet that fought with terrifying coordination, using tactics that seemed to defy military logic, yet proved devastatingly effective. 2,000 human ships against our entire remaining fleet, Crystal said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. We had 5,000 vessels. The accumulated military might of 17 star systems should have been enough. The battle had lasted 14 hours. Human ships fought in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. They used the solar system's gravity wells as tactical weapons, turned asteroids into guided missiles, and employed battle formations that seemed to anticipate every hegemony move before it was made. They didn't just defeat us, Crystal continued, his cybernetic parts sparking with the intensity of his emotions. They dissected us. Every weakness in our formations, every flaw in our technology, every psychological pressure point in our command structure, they exploited all of it simultaneously. The alien veteran described watching his proud civilization crumble in real time. Ships that had conquered worlds were destroyed by human fighters piloted by teenagers. Battle stations that had stood for centuries were cracked open like eggs by weapons that shouldn't have existed. Most crushing of all, hegemony soldiers began surrendering rather than face the human war machine. We lost everything, Crystal said, his voice cracking with emotion. Not just ships or territory. We lost our identity as warriors. Your species didn't just defeat us. You made us understand that we were never warriors at all. We were just bullies picking on weaker opponents. The alien veteran struggled to his feet, his damaged servos whining in protest. He looked directly at Yuki, his organic eye filled with a mixture of fear and admiration that seemed to encompass everything he had experienced. Humans don't fight wars, he said with absolute certainty. You become war itself. Every man, woman, and child transforms into a weapon when threatened. That's not military strategy. That's evolution. You're not just soldiers, you're survival incarnate. Crystal limped toward the cantina's exit, his cybernetic parts casting strange shadows in the neon light. At the doorway, he turned back one final time. "Tell your people this story, human journalist," he said, his voice carrying across the smoky room. "Tell them that somewhere in the darkness between stars, entire civilizations whisper your species' name with terror. The hegemony died the day we encountered humanity. Just didn't know it yet." As the alien veteran disappeared into the station's shadows, Yuki stared at her recorder, understanding for the first time why no species had dared challenge humanity since the war ended. The galaxy had learned its lesson through blood and fire. Taught by a species that refused to accept defeat as a possibility, she looked around the cantina, noticing for the first time how the other patrons, representatives of dozens of different dissolved species, had been listening to Crystal's story with expressions of fear and respect. They all knew the truth now. Humanity wasn't just another species among many. They were the reason the galaxy had finally found peace. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and the teacher had been humanity itself. The end.